Alright guys, so in this video we have to talk about what it means to have Sun in the 8th house, right? So let's say this is your natal placement, you have Sun in the 8th house. I actually have this, so I'm going to be very good at talking about this because I actually have this placement, right? So what does the Sun represent in our charts? The Sun represents ego, personality, sense of self, I am, where we shine, the area of life that gives us vitality and makes us feel alive, right? So when you have your Sun sitting in the 8th house, what does the 8th house represent? The 8th house represents complicated emotions and finances. 100%. That is the best way to explain the 8th house. Complicated emotions and finances. See, the 2nd house is simple emotions and finances. The 8th house is when things become complicated, right? So when you have your Sun, identity, personality, ego, sitting in the 8th house of complicated emotions and finances, you totally identify with being very complicated emotionally and having very complicated finances. Now, so we know what complicated emotions mean, but what does it mean to have complex finances? That means that you probably own a lot of assets. You own real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, valuable art. You own assets, because yes, when you have assets, that's when it does become more complicated financially. See, cash, if you just have like cash, that's not complicated, right? If you just have money that's coming in from your salary or your job, that's not complicated. But when you have money coming in from your stocks, or you have money coming in from your real estate, or let's say you're married and now you've taken on your partner's debt. So you have a certain amount of debt, they have a certain amount of debt, but you guys are married now. So you guys debt, this is our debt, right? That's why the 8th house comes after the 7th house, which is the house of marriage, right? So you get married in the 7th house, and the 8th house is when you guys, all of your resources merge and things become a lot more complicated. Because think about it, the 8th house explains why a lot of people stay married and stay in miserable relationships, because they don't want to deal with having to separate the complicated finances. They don't want to have to go to court and fight over the assets and stuff like that, right? So when you have your ego, identity, sense of self, and also vitality sitting in the 8th house, this is a house where you can shine. Because I remember when I was younger, I was always trying to figure out how can I express my Sun in the 8th house the best way. And I didn't really start to express this until I got much older, because now I'm a heavy investor. Now I do totally identify with being an investor. I invest heavily into the stock market. I invest into real estate investment trust, which is pretty much where you own real estate online. I invest into cryptocurrencies. Like, I totally identify with being an investor. And I do totally identify with being very complicated emotionally, 100%. And remember, the 8th house is ruled by Scorpio. So when you have this, you take on the personality of a Scorpio. See, I'm a Leo, but I have my Leo Sun in the 8th house. So I'm a Scorpio-like Leo. So I'm way more complicated than the average Leo. Because that's the thing, mind you, being a Leo, you already very dominant and controlling, and you like to be a leader, and then you throw in a Scorpio on top of it. Oh yeah, I can be a very complicated and controlling and power and dominance obsessed person, 100%. So yeah, so if you have this, you're the same way. You totally identify with being very complicated. But the way how you make this, you express this in the best way is try to identify with being complicated emotionally and financially in a good way, And that's what I try to do. I try to identify with being complicated as far as those matters in a healthy way. I'm in a healthy marriage. I have a healthy attitude towards assets. I have a healthy attitude towards debt. And that's what you have to do as well. When you have Sun in the 8th house, that's the exact same thing that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to find a healthy way to identify with complicated emotions and finances. Hey you, did you like this video? If so, consider booking an astrology reading with me, Z the Astrologer, at astrologyztv.com. The link is in the description. I look forward to meeting you. Thank you for watching the video. Take care.